Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the only place where we turn massive stacks of research into instantly usable knowledge. Today, we are taking on a giant of the Italian Baroque, an artist who achieved international fame in an age when professional opportunities for women were, well, virtually non-existent. Artemisia Gentileschi.
Indeed. And the listener who asked for this deep dive is going to get a complex, often shocking, and ultimately triumphant story. We aren't just looking at her magnificent canvases, we're wading through historical biography, detailed court transcripts from her youth, and, decades of modern artistic and feminist interpretation that constantly tries to categorize her.
It's a huge task, but our mission today is pretty clear. We want to understand the extraordinary interplay between her private life, the trauma, and the sheer resilience, and her prolific artistic output. We need to grasp why the scholarly debate around her remains so incredibly vibrant centuries after her death.
And that debate is so essential because her professional achievement is, it's truly historic. She worked across the major art capitals of Baroque Europe, Rome, Florence, Naples, and even London. And she was producing professional work of exceptional quality by the age of 15.
15, that's incredible.
It is. And by 1616, she had secured this, unprecedented honor of becoming the first woman ever accepted into the prestigious Accademia delle Arti del Disegno in Florence. She was, in short, a pioneer, a survivor, and a powerful, shrewd businesswoman.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey chronologically. We're starting with her intense early training in Rome, moving through the defining legal and personal crisis of her youth, and then charting her long and highly successful career as an independent painter who catered to European royalty and the most powerful patrons of the era. We're aiming to give you all the context you need to truly appreciate the depth of her genius. All right, start at the beginning. Artemisia Gentileschi was born in Rome in 1593. She was the eldest child of Orazio Gentileschi, who was a respected painter of Tuscan origin who has settled, in the Eternal City.
Right. And her mother died relatively early, around 1605, which meant that Artemisia was primarily raised by her father.
And that specific family arrangement was just absolutely crucial for her development, wasn't it?
It was everything. Orazio ran his own working studio, and that workshop became Artemisia's classroom. Unlike most young women of her social standing, she wasn't, primarily confined to domestic duties. Instead, she received this intensive, practical, artistic apprenticeship, learning everything from stretching canvases to preparing pigments.
And the artistic environment she was growing up in was, it was revolutionary. Orazio Gentileschi was one of the foremost followers of the most disruptive painter of the time, Michelangelo Medici de Caravaggio.
Exactly. And Caravaggio just fundamentally changed painting. He completely rejected idealism. He chose instead to paint real models, blemishes and all, often casting them into this intense dramatic light.
Warts and all.
Warts and all, yeah. This revolutionary approach, it's known as the Caravaggisti style, and it relied heavily on chiaroscuro, which is the modeling of form through light and shadow.
And more specifically, tenebrism.
Right, tenebrism, which is the extreme, almost theatrical use of darkness to spotlight key dramatic action. You should think of a beam of harsh, directional light just cutting through a pitch-black room. That's the effect. Orazio adopted this technique, and it gave his work immense power.
And Artemisia didn't just passively learn. She was a prodigy. The forces are very clear on this. She showed far more enthusiasm and just inherent talent than her brothers, who were also working alongside her. She quickly mastered color mixing, brushwork, all the demanding technical requirements of the Baroque style.
Oh, absolutely. By 1612, when she was barely 19, her father was already boasting to potential patrons that her talent was peerless after only 3 years of intensive practice.
Wow.
Yeah, and that speaks volumes about her focus, but it also provides a really interesting distinction from her father. While both were Caravaggisti, Orazio's approach often remained, comparatively idealized. He might focus on the beauty of a fabric or the grace of a pose.
But Artemisia?
Artemisia, however, she embraced a much higher, almost brutal degree of naturalism right from the get-go. She was not afraid of the grit.
That distinction, idealism versus raw naturalism, you can see it immediately in her earliest surviving work, which is just stunning. That's Susanna and the Elders, completed around 1610 when she was only 17.
Yes, Susanna and the Elders, it's a masterpiece of synthesis. If you look at it, you see the dramatic tenebrism of Caravaggio, the light catching the flesh in the folds of the drapery. But the composition itself is so classically grounded, showing the influence of the Bolognese school led by masters like Annibale Carracci.
And what's so crucial is the subject's expression. Susanna, this righteous woman being spied on and propositioned by two older men while she's bathing. She's typically depicted as either seductive or just passive.
Hmm.
But Artemisia Susanna is depicted with this palpable, almost painful emotional weight. Her body language is coiled with anxiety, fear, and disgust. She's twisting away from the elders who are looming menacingly above her.
And that visceral psychological reaction is what defines Artemisia's genius from the very start. She's not just painting a biblical story, she's painting the drama of a woman under immense duress. She's already injecting this intense psychological realism into the Caravaggisti visual language. This powerful start, however, quickly transitioned into a devastating personal crisis that would irrevocably mark her career. And here's where the historical biography just becomes inseparable from her art. The events began around 1611. Orazio Gentileschi, he was seeking to collaborate on a prestigious project decorating the Casino della Muse, and he brought in another painter, Agostino Tassi.
Right, and because Artemisia's mother had died, Orazio hired a female tenant, a woman named Donatuzia, to act as a chaperone, sort of guardian figure for Artemisia.
Which was a necessary formality. You had to do that to protect her honor and reputation in 17th century Rome.
But Tuzia failed, spectacularly in this responsibility.
She absolutely did. She permitted Tassi, along with his friend Cosimo Corli, to visit Artemisia frequently at the Gentileschi home. Tuzia later testified that Tassi became increasingly obsessive and aggressive in his pursuit of the young, promising artist.
And that led to the incident in May of 1611. Tassi raped Gentileschi when they were alone. The court transcripts, which are meticulously detailed, they record that she fought back with immense resistance, scratching his face and attempting unsuccessfully to use a knife to defend herself.
And what adds a layer of just absolute tragedy is the chaperone's betrayal. Gentileschi cried out repeatedly to Donatuzia for help, but the chaperone remained silent. She offered no assistance whatsoever.
Wow!
This complicity in her suffering is just a chilling detail. Historians have often compared her function to that of a procuress, someone who allows sexual exploitation to happen.
And the trauma didn't even end there. Following the assault, Tassi manipulated her for months. He demanded further sexual relations under the false but legally critical promise of marriage.
Right, because in 17th century Italy, for a woman, marriage was the only way to restore her damaged honor and social standing after something like this.
So Artemisia initially agreed to this, desperate to secure her future and reputation, not knowing that Tassi was secretly already married, though estranged from his wife.
It was only 9 months later, when Orazio Gentileschi discovered Tassi had no intention of marrying his daughter, that Orazio formally pressed charges. And this brings us to a crucial point about the 17th century legal system. The 7-month trial was not centered on Artemisia's personal suffering or the violation of her bodily autonomy.
Not at all. The legal system viewed the crime almost entirely through the lens of property. The trial focused relentlessly on the violation of the Gentileschi family's honor, the damage to the family's economic and social assets caused by the sexual defamation of the daughter.
The law just struggled to conceptualize the profound psychological and physical trauma inflicted upon Artemisia herself.
And the trial itself became a spectacle, but it also became a platform for exposing Tassi's true character, didn't it?
Oh, completely. The judicial proceedings shockingly implicated him in a whole string of other serious crimes. He was accused of planning to murder his estranged wife, committing adultery with his sister-in-law, and even plotting to steal Orazio's valuable paintings. This context shows Gentileschi was not only assaulted, but was navigating a relationship with a genuine career criminal.
But the most infamous and, frankly, barbaric detail of the trial, and the moment that crystallizes the profound injustice, is the application of the civil torture. Gentileschi was subjected to this procedure cords, wrapped tightly around her fingers and pulled, similar to thumbscrews, for the stated purpose of verifying her testimony.
It's unbelievable. In this brutal system, physical pain was deemed a more reliable witness to the truth than a woman's own word.
But the source material, the court transcripts, they immortalize her moment of absolute defiance. Enduring this physical agony, she looked directly at her assailant, Tassi, and delivered her famous retort, filled with bitter irony. "This is the ring that you give me, and these are your promises."
It's an extraordinary testament to her presence of mind and courage under duress. It speaks of a resilience that would define her entire career.
After all of that, the verdict was rendered in 1612. Tassi was convicted and sentenced to exile from Rome. However, in a final twist of injustice, that punishment was never carried out.
Never. Tassi ultimately spent less than a year in prison and continued to live and work in Rome, though his reputation was, thankfully, severely damaged.
So the trial ended in a legal failure for justice. But the immense documentation it produced became her unlikely historical salvation. It forced an immediate, drastic change in her life, preventing her from becoming trapped in Rome's suffocating social structure.
Exactly. This forced pivot led directly to Florence and to a new beginning.
And that move to Florence happened with lightning speed. Within a month of the trial's conclusion, Orazio Gentileschi arranged for Artemisia to marry Pierantonio Stiatesi, who was a modest Florentine artist. The couple immediately relocated. And this move wasn't just a geographic change, it was a total professional reset.
Florence was decisive for both her family life and, far more critically, for her professional independence. In Rome, the taint of the trial and the violation of her honor would have severely limited her career opportunities.
Sure.
But in Florence, she could rebuild her reputation and her career from a position of fresh strength.
And she didn't just rebuild, she exploded onto the scene. She quickly established herself as a highly successful court painter, securing the patronage of the most powerful family in Tuscany, the House of Medici.
And this included Cosimo II de' Medici, the Grand Duke, and his influential wife, Christina of Lorraine.
And Medici patronage was pure gold, right?
Oh, it was everything. It wasn't just about commissions, it was about elevation. Her court involvement widened her education considerably. She learned to read and write, a vital step up from the purely practical education of her father's workshop, and she became deeply familiar with the cultural life of Florence, including music and theater.
And you can see that sophistication in her work. If you look at the lavish, painstaking detail she dedicates to depicting clothing in her paintings, you realize she wasn't just following fashion. She was integrating her figures into the contemporary courtly aesthetic. She understood that painting biblical figures in spectacular, high-status courtly dress was essential to appealing to this elite clientele.
Absolutely. But the landmark achievement of this Florentine period, the one that cemented her professional status permanently, was her acceptance into the Accademia delle Arti del Disegno.
The premier art institution in Italy.
Exactly, and by being the first woman admitted, she was officially recognized as a peer of the most respected male artists, securing her professional standing far beyond the confines of her father's reputation.
A perfect illustration of the respect and high status she commanded came in 1615. She was commissioned by Michelangelo Buonarroti, the younger, the great-nephew of the master, to contribute a painting to the Galleria ceiling of the Casa Buonarroti.
The commission was for the allegory of inclination. And here's the truly fascinating business detail. Artemisia, who was heavily pregnant at the time, was paid 3 times more than any of the other participating artists.
3 times more. That is incredible.
It is. It demonstrates not just her talent, but her sheer commercial value and her ability to negotiate high fees, challenging the financial norms of the era for a female painter.
And the painting itself is so powerful. A nude young woman holding a compass. It's widely believed by scholars that the subject bears a striking resemblance to Gentileschi herself.
This early use of self-portraiture as an allegory for artistic energy and drive seems to intentionally assert her place in the artistic pantheon, right there in the home of one of history's greatest masters.
And her productivity during this period was, as the sources suggest, just staggering. Florence is where she solidified her signature themes, including the conversion of the Magdalene, and crucially began her intense, repeated exploration of the Judith story. This includes her dramatic, second large-scale version of Judith's slaying Holofernes, which is now at the Uffizi Gallery.
She was absolutely captivated by this theme of female power and violence. Our sources confirm she produced 6 known variations of the Judith theme across her career. It shows how central this narrative was to her artistic identity and, perhaps to the demands of her patrons who recognized her unique ability to handle such intense subjects.
On the personal side, while she and Pierantonio had 5 children in Florence, only their daughter, Prudentia, also known as Palmira, survived into adulthood.
Right, and Gentileschi followed in her father's footsteps and personally trained Prudentia as a painter, though tragically none of her work is known to survive. This desire to pass on her mastery really speaks to her commitment to professional legacy.
And we can't talk about Florence without mentioning the newly discovered letters from 2011, dating 1616 to 1620, which give us this unprecedented insight into her private life.
Yes, the affair. They reveal a passionate, years-long love affair with Francesco Maria Maringhi, a wealthy Florentine nobleman.
And what's so fascinating here is the social and economic pragmatism surrounding the affair. Her husband, Pierantonio Stiatesi, was not only aware of the relationship, but was in correspondence with Maringhi himself, often writing on the backs of Artemisia's own love letters.
He tolerated it. He tolerated the affair because Maringhi provided crucial financial support to the couple, who were often struggling with debt despite Artemisia's high commissions.
That paints a really complex picture, doesn't it? It suggests a pragmatic, almost business-like arrangement within her marriage, prioritizing financial stability and her career over romantic fidelity.
It does, but the increasing rumors surrounding the affair, combined with ongoing financial and legal woes related to debt, eventually prompted the couple to leave Florence. They returned to Rome in 1620, seeking new opportunities and marking the beginning of her incredibly mobile and self-directed second career phase.
So the 1620s began with significant upheaval back in Rome. Her son Cristofano died shortly after their return, her father Orazio left for Genoa, and her husband Pier Antonio. He just essentially vanishes from the historical record by 1623.
Right, so Artemisia was now, by all accounts, an independent single artist and a mother managing a large household in the hyper-competitive Roman art market.
This is a crucial pivot point in her development, isn't it? She's transitioning from her father's shadow and this semi-arranged marriage to complete professional autonomy.
Absolutely. And despite the challenges and despite limited access to the most massive, lucrative papal commissions, as Pope Urban VIII favored painters like Pietro da Cortona, her reputation continued to grow through private patronage.
She was incredibly savvy about building a robust network of private collectors. She sought out important figures like the Spanish nobleman Fernando Afán de Ribera, the Duke of Alcalá. He acquired several key works, including her Penitent Magdalene.
And perhaps her most important patron in this period was the influential humanist Cassiano dal Pozzo. He was a major collector and intellectual figure. And Pozzo didn't just buy art, he helped forge relationships between Gentileschi and other leading artists, aiding her networking and ensuring her work was seen by the right people.
So it shows how much she relied on political and social intelligence, not just her skill with a brush.
Exactly. And technically, the Roman environment of the 1620s was demanding, forcing another evolution in her style. The Caravaggisti movement was still potent, but the more classical, refined style of the Bolognese school was also gaining huge traction. And Gentileschi adapted seamlessly to these shifting tastes.
Right, if we compare her 1610 Susanna and the Elders to the 1622 version she completed in Rome, the difference is stark.
It really is. The early one is raw and dramatic. The later version incorporates more of that Bolognese classicism. You see smoother outlines, less aggressive shadows, and a more traditionally beautiful figure.
Furthermore, works like her Judith and her maidservant, the one in Detroit, showcase her absolute mastery of chiaroscuro and tenebrism. These were the techniques that made her incredibly popular with international artists visiting Rome, like the Dutch master Gerrit van Honthorst. She also collaborated with and profoundly influenced the French painter Simone Vouet during this time.
Then, around 1626 or 27, she took another significant commercial leap. She moved to Venice, most likely seeking richer commissions and a less crowded field than Rome.
And this 3-year interlude, though less documented, was another period of deep stylistic learning.
It was. She fully assimilated the renowned Venetian tradition of colorism. So unlike the Roman emphasis on line, structure, and intense light-dark contrasts, the Venetian school prioritized the rich interaction of colors, deep reds, golds, vibrant blues, to define space and emotion.
And her works from this time, like the Sleeping Venus and Esther before Ahasuerus, they demonstrate this shift. Her palette gained this warmth and richness, moving away from the severe high-contrast drama of her earlier Roman period.
She was consistently proving that she was not a one-trick pony. She was a master adapter of regional styles.
So by 1630, she had moved again, this time settling in Naples, which would become her long-term professional base for the rest of her life, barring the trip to England.
And Naples as an art center was booming. It was rich with competing workshops and passionate art lovers. She may have been invited there by the Duke of Alcala, who is now the Viceroy of Naples.
And Naples allowed her to work alongside and influence some of the leading figures of the South Italian Baroque, including Giuseppe da Ribera and Domenichino.
Yes, and the 18th century biographer Bernardo de Domenici specifically highlighted the artistic friendship between Artemisia and the local painter Massimo Stanzione. He noted that Stanzione learned his superior coloring techniques directly from her. This confirms her role not just as a successful painter, but as a key stylistic influence on her male peers.
And crucially, Naples is where she significantly diversified her subject matter. She undertook her first commissions for cathedral paintings like St. Januarius in the amphitheater of Pozzuoli.
Which was a massive hurdle. Securing commissions for public sacred spaces had been almost impossible for women artists previously.
She also expanded beyond her famous heroines, painting new mythological subjects like Cariska and the Satyr and the birth of St. John the Baptist. And this directly counters that later, narrow interpretation that she only painted vengeful women.
It absolutely does. She was a professional artist responding to the full range of patron demands. And this Neapolitan period is where she fully realized her role as a professional business director. From the mid-1630s through the 1650s, Gentileschi was running a highly productive workshop, functioning as a true entrepreneur, managing assistants for large narrative commissions, like her various versions of Bathsheba at her bath.
So this scalability was essential for sustained success.
It was. Gentileschi would focus her personal attention on the principal figures, the faces, the dramatic gestures that preserved her signature style and psychological intensity. Meanwhile, her assistants would contribute secondary elements, things like architecture, landscapes, elaborate textiles, and sometimes secondary figures.
And this division of labor allowed her to meet high demand efficiently. It led to necessary collaborations, like with Onofrio Palumbo, who acted as a foreman and business inspector, helping her manage finances and logistics.
And while this has caused modern attribution debates, trying to separate her hand from that of her assistants, it cements her image as a masterful professional who knew how to scale an artistic enterprise.
This period of sustained success was then interrupted by a major royal opportunity. In 1638, she traveled to London to join her aging father, Orazio. He was serving as court painter for the art enthusiast King Charles I.
And the king himself had specifically extended the invitation to Artemisia, recognizing her international renown.
This was the peak of Baroque courtly patronage. She and Orazio worked together, most notably contributing to Orazio's vast ceiling allegory, Triumph of Peace in the Arts, for the Queen's House in Greenwich. And Charles III, intrigued by her celebrity, included several of her key works in his personal collection, most famously the magnificent self-portrait as the allegory of painting.
Which is just a defining image of artistic ambition and self-representation.
But the English period was short-lived.
It was. Orazio died suddenly in 1639. Artemisia stayed on for a few more years, fulfilling her own commissions, but the rising political instability in England, which culminated in the start of the English Civil War in 1642, made her position untenable. She left London and returned to the stability of Naples.
And after returning to Naples, her movements become a bit harder to track, but we know she was active. She resurfaced in correspondence in 1649 with her mentor, the Sicilian nobleman Don Antonio Ruffo. Her last known letter, dated 1650, confirms she was still fully engaged in her art, though perhaps increasingly reliant on her foreman, Palumbo.
Right. She accepted commissions right up until 1654. The historical consensus is that she likely died in the devastating plague that swept Naples in 1656. The sheer scale of that epidemic wiped out a huge swath of the population, including many of her artistic peers.
And tragically, her tomb in San Giovanni Battista dei Fiorentini was destroyed during reconstruction work in the 1950s, leaving her final resting place unmarked. Artemisia's decades-long career demonstrates this incredible determination against severe societal and professional odds. Now, let's step back and look at how critical history has both championed and struggled with her legacy, starting with her earliest modern champion.
The pivotal moment of rediscovery came in 1916 with the Italian critic Roberto Longhi. He famously declared her the only woman in Italy who ever knew about painting, coloring, drawing, and other fundamentals.
A quote which, even with its underlying chauvinism, really validated her mastery against her male contemporaries.
It did. Longhi praised her brushwork as bold and certain, noting there was no sign of timidness. When he discussed her violent scenes, particularly Judith slaying Holofernes, he focused on the sheer, chilling impassivity of the painter and the technical execution, like the realistic detail of how the blood spurts and decorates the scene.
She made no attempt to romanticize the violence.
Not at all. Longhi also conducted an early statistical analysis of her work, and he noted a significant pattern in her choice of subject matter. 94% of her 57 attributed works feature women as protagonists or equal partners to men. This includes figures like Jael and Sisera, Lucretia, and Esther.
And these figures were universally depicted lacking the stereotypical feminine traits of the era, timidness, weakness, emotional frailty. They were courageous, rebellious, and powerful personalities.
Right. And scholars have grouped these subjects under the art historical theme known as the power of women, a theme she clearly championed through her patronage choices.
So despite this early acclaim, Gentileschi largely remained a footnote for decades, until the modern era. The real explosion of global interest, the moment she transformed from a successful historical painter into an international cultural icon, happened much later in the 1970s.
Hmm. And that shift was largely catalyzed by the feminist art history movement, specifically Linda Nochlund's seminal 1971 essay, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists?
I know that one. Nochlund's argument was that systemic, institutional oppression, not a lack of inherent talent, was the barrier to women's recognition. And Gentileschi, the victim of a public trial who achieved success regardless, became the perfect case study.
She did, and this led directly to the formation of the vengeance theory. Feminist scholars, most notably Mary Garrard, heavily emphasized her early trauma, interpreting her powerful biblical heroines, especially her repeated, brutal depictions of Judith slaying Holofernes, as deliberate, visual manifestations of repressed rebellion.
Or a kind of symbolic visual vengeance against male oppression.
Exactly. The act of painting the beheading of a man by two women became synonymous with her own need for justice.
It's a compelling, immediate interpretation that resonates strongly, but the source material shows that this theory quickly faced some rigorous academic critique for being overly reductive. We have to engage with that counterargument.
Oh, absolutely. Scholars like Judith W. Mann argued that these feminist readings created a confining, narrow expectation for her work. Mann questioned the attribution or significance of works that don't conform to the strong, assertive woman model, such as her gentle Madonna and child compositions or the submissive, traditionally rendered depiction of the Annunciation.
Right. If her whole career was about vengeance, how do we explain those works?
Exactly. And another critical voice was Griselda Pollock, who argued that the sensationalism of the rape trial has unfortunately become the singular axis of interpretation for Gentileschi, overshadowing her truly remarkable decades-long professional career as a business owner and mobile artist across 4 major art centers.
So Pollock was urging for a rereading of her work.
She was. She suggested viewing Judith and Holofernes not as personal revenge, but as a story of political courage and, crucially, a narrative of female collaboration during wartime. Pollock stressed that Gentileschi's success was fundamentally tied to her professional adaptability, her shrewd business sense, and her ability to produce a varied repertoire that satisfied the contemporary market's appetite for dramatic heroine narratives. She was fulfilling commissions, not necessarily conducting therapy through paint.
That's a fascinating tension, artist as trauma survivor versus artist as professional pragmatist. And we can't ignore the sharply dissenting viewpoints either, which aim to decenter the trauma entirely.
No, like Camille Paglia, for example. She offered a genuinely radical critique, arguing that the modern feminist preoccupation is misguided. She asserted that Gentileschi was simply a polished, competent painter in a Baroque style created by men, suggesting her success lay in technical execution rather than revolutionary feminist ideology. Paglia pointed to visual elements, arguing that Gentileschi's fidelity to Caravaggio's dramatic formula demonstrated her adoption of a pre-existing male style.
So these conflicting perspectives really show why a balanced view is so vital for you, the listener.
Recent critics are seeking a less reductive understanding. They're acknowledging both her determination and technical quality in fighting deep-seated prejudices against women painters, while emphasizing that her repertoire was functionally much broader than just her most famous sensational paintings suggest. Her professional achievement lies in her longevity and her skill in navigating the complex world of Baroque patronage.
And despite, or maybe because of, these academic debates, her story and her dramatic, often violent paintings continue to resonate so powerfully in modern popular culture.
For sure, her life has been the subject of countless novels, plays like Sally Clark's Life Without Instruction and Breach Theaters. It's true, which pulls lines directly from the trial transcripts, and film and television, including a controversial 1997 film Artemisia, and entrances in shows like The Crown.
It's clear that while art historians are continually refining the context of her immense professional success and business acumen, her personal story remains this enduring, powerful narrative used by contemporary culture to explore themes of resilience, justice, and female agency. What an incredible, multi-layered deep dive. We've traced Artemisia Gentileschi's trajectory from a talented prodigy training in the dramatic shadow of Caravaggio through the horrific ordeal of the public trial and subsequent injustice, and then into an internationally recognized, well-compensated artist who managed large-scale commissions across the capitals of Baroque Europe.
Her achievement truly lies in her professional longevity and remarkable adaptability. She was a shrewd businesswoman who traveled constantly, adapted her style instantly to meet the demands of Venetian colorism, Roman tenebrism, and Neapolitan large-scale production, and successfully ran a major workshop. This historical artist must be appreciated first and foremost for these unparalleled business and artistic skills, separate from, though inevitably informed by, the powerful modern icon she has become. Her ability to thrive despite severe societal barriers is the true marker of her genius.
Absolutely. We know the intimate, often minute-by-minute details of Gentileschi's trial because the legal documentation was so extensive. It's a historical anomaly. And this raises a profound question for you, the listener, as you approach art and history. When a figure's sensational biography is so readily accessible, how much does a biographical detail risk obscuring the true extent of their professional accomplishments and creative range? When we look at Gentileschi's paintings today, are we primarily seeing her undeniable artistic genius and technical mastery, or are we still, subconsciously, just reading the court documents? It's a crucial question to mull over next time you're standing before one of her masterpieces.